Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. Today I want to talk about starting a new project. The reason for that is I got a couple of questions on how I would approach starting a new idea. And recently I've started quite a few new productions, so I think I'll have something interesting to say on the topic. Now this is my template. This is how I open up a new project in Ableton. And you can see that I'm already organized in the sense that we have our drums, basses, synths, one-shots, pads, effects and vocals already placed in groups, and I can just start adding to the groups if I need to add extra sounds. Now when I start, I just want to have a kick and bass. Usually that involves going into one of my sample packs for a kick. And then I need a bass line, so I'll go into one of my presets for a bass line. This is a preset from my recently released Projector Psytrance Essentials Volume 3. And I usually use this shifter bass line here, because it comes with all of the processing built into the wavetable, so I just have to set the processing knob here or the phasing knob here. I can close it a little bit, making it a little bit tighter on the envelope, and I can start to play my bass line. Let's say that we're working in G sharp for this project. We go 1, 2, 3 down in octaves, and I just set a little bit of a lower velocity on this first note here, and then duplicate it over, and we have our kick and bass. And you can hear how quick and easy that is, and that's really what you want, because you don't want to spend a lot of time wasting your creative energy at the beginning of your project thinking about the details of the kick and the bass. For one, you don't know the context, you don't know what type of track it is going to be, how the track is going to sound. And two, if you spend that hour or two working on your kick and bass, you lose all of your creativity. And that's because when it comes to a kick and bass, it's not about really being creative. It just needs to work from a technical perspective. The real creativity in Psytrance, at least according to me, is mainly in the sequences, the one-shots, the vocals, and maybe sometimes in the atmospheres. So what I'll usually do is I'll drag this out maybe for 8 bars, something like that. And I also increase the length parameter here. This is just so that anytime I'm zoomed in and I need to, for example, make a different loop point here, I can just click this and loop whatever I'm working on. So let's say that I make another sequence. This is where the first idea is coming in. Something like this. I'm just going to make something simple here. I do my little bit of sound design. I make it sound a little bit better with some processing. And you hear that we have our first idea down. Now, before we continue, I do quickly want to say that a lot of the files that we've been using up until this point are actually from preset packs and sample packs that I sell on my Gumroad. And right now I'm running a holiday sale, details for which will be appearing in a graphic somewhere. I'm pre-recording this video because I'm actually going to be back home at my parents, so I don't actually know the details, but there should be a percentage somewhere and a date somewhere, as well as a discount code which activates the discount at checkout. This one is valid on all of my products, so that includes my preset packs, my sample packs, and also my masterclass. So if you've been thinking about getting my products, now is the time to do so. A link for the Gumroad page is going to be in the description. Now let's get back into the video. Now at this point, very early on in the project, I already like to go into my production levels. What that means is that I go into the levels of all of my tracks and I set them down to basically like a standard. So my kick is always at -8. My bassline is always at -9. And my sequences are roughly at -10 to -15. Now this is not going to be the final level of any of these elements. I'm actually going to export all of these elements at the end of the production stage and I'm going to mix in Reaper. So this part that you're seeing here has nothing to do with mixing. People often get them confused because mixing can only really happen at the end of a track, like the real form of mixing where you're balancing all of the elements. You can already prepare stuff for the mix like we're doing right here with, for example, removing the lower frequencies or getting a basic idea of what the volume balances could potentially be. But real mixing only happens at the end of the track where you're really trying to establish a final balance between all of the elements. So usually at this point, I like to get my key drums in there. And what I like to do is, again, I like to just be quick in here. I have a few samples that I know work and I have a few different sample packs that I usually go to. So let's say that we want to start with a closed head. I want a little bit of a longer closed head for this one, for example. And I know where to get them. So right here, a little bit of a longer sample there. And I'm just going to layer this in here. This is going to be our 16 note head. So this is right here. We want to add a little bit of sidechain maybe. And of course we have to set the volume. Now what I like to do is to set this volume in a group. So what I like to do is set my drum group to -10, and then I can set volumes in there based on the level differences that I want between the elements. So I have an overall loudness for all of the drums combined, and then relative loudnesses between all of the different drums. Now, as I said, one of the things that is crucial for my early stage production is getting organized. And one of the things that I like to do when getting organized is have a kick group and a bass group. I don't have a kick and bass group, I have a kick group and a bass group. What that means is that my kick is in its own group. This then goes to 0 dB, and I transport that -8 dB to here. And the same is true for the bassline. Bassline goes into its own group, and the bassline group goes to -9. This means a couple of things. For one, I can link these groups to SiScope. Here we go to group 18, here we go to group 23, and now my kick and bass will show up in SiScope. The second thing is I can add bass lines to this, I can add different experiments to this, I can add different kicks to this, and it will always show up in SiScope. The third thing is, let's say that I'm happy with a kick, but I want to do something a little bit different. Like for example here, I want to do a little bit of a kick roll instead of a bass line. I can do that in here by adding another track. And what this allows me to do is it allows me to separate my main kick from whatever kick that I'm using for the kick roll. So let's say that in this case, we want to do 2 16 notes here. We just add a fade towards the end there, duplicate it over, and then I can now set the relative volume of this kick roll to the main kick. So let's go 4 dB lower, so that the main kick still has a little bit more impact than the kicks from the roll. And I'll do the same with reverse kicks. If I need a reverse kick, I'll make an extra track that I solely use for the reverse kicks. And this is the kind of organization that just helps me stay focused, and when I'm writing, it helps me stay more productive. So let's continue with the drums. We're going to need a snare and an open hi-hat at least. So let's start with the open hat since we're here. I want to go with a classic 909 open hi-hat. Something like that. One of the things you'll see is that now I've opened up the sample packs, I actually have a set of favorite drums right here, which I also can pick from. When it comes to the open hi-hat, we talked about this before, you want it on the offbeat, so let's just place it there and let's duplicate that over. And now let's say that the closed hats are a little bit loud for my taste here in regards to the open hats. I'm just purely basing that on the volume with respect to the open hat. If I want to change the overall volume, I'll do that here. I won't go in here and have all 2 of them away from 0. Essentially what that means is that there's always going to be at least one track that is sitting at 0 dB, and any overall volume is going to be applied to the group. We now can pick our snare. Maybe let's go with that one, nice and snappy. We'll duplicate that over as well. It's still a little bit boring, so let's add another thing to it, which is going to be a top loop. Something like this maybe, nice and clean. And maybe I'll add another one to it as well, maybe this one here, just for a little bit of extra variation. And this is usually the point where I decide if my initial idea, if my initial sequence is worth continuing. Now, this is not how I always write the tracks. Sometimes I'll start with an idea for the intro, sometimes I'll start for an idea for the drop, sometimes I'll have an idea for a drop, but it doesn't involve all of the top drums. But whatever the case may be, at this point I need to start thinking about arrangement. And the way that I like to do that is I immediately like to take this part here and put it in its place, where I expect it to be in the track. So this is a fairly high energy part of the track. It's not going to be appropriate to have it right after the intro. So from an arrangement point of view, we're probably going to start this segment right about here or here. Let's just place it here for now. Let's make this the last part here. So that's going to go into the fill, and then we'll add 2 more versions of this. And this is going to be the first section of the track. Now from here, pretty quickly, I like to lay out the fills. As you can see right now, we have this little kick fill thing over here. What I would do is remove some of the hats here, something like that. And let's remove some of the loops here as well, like this. I'm keeping a snare in here so that that layers nicely with the kick here. But I'm going for a very short fill at this point in the project. What I do like to do at this point though is lay out the rest of the project, the rest of the structure, so that when I go into actually writing out the ideas, I have something to put them in. So let's say that here we want a fill of 4 bars, and then seeing as the next segment is going to have a very short fill, here we'll go with a very long one of 2 bars. Obviously that kick is going to need a bass line, so we'll copy that over as well, here and here. And now I can start adding the one-shots, the extra sequences, and all of the other things that I want to this portion of the track. I do want to do one more thing, and that is defining the second energy level. I've talked about this before in the sense that the drums are what defines the energy level. And you're going to have 3 energy levels, one without any drums, one with some of the drums, and then one with all of the drums. What that means is that we need to define kind of like the mid-level. And I'm just going to do that by copying over all of the drums to the part here, and then removing the ones that I don't want. In this case, I'm going to remove both the open hat and the snare. And we'll remove the drums in the fill as well. And we'll end up with something like this. Maybe this closed hat can be a little bit quieter. So there we have our 3 energy levels. Now once we have that and we're a little bit further into the project, maybe I've written down a few more sequences, maybe a few more other ideas, I can start to write it further out linearly. And what I'll usually do is I'll just continue writing in the same way, in the sense that I'll fill up this part with all of the sequences that I need, and I'll just take one of these parts here, the drums and the kick and the bass, and duplicate them over to whatever point that I need. Make the fill for them, define the length of the fill for them. Maybe I'll do some specific things in the fill. Maybe I have a drum fill in mind. Maybe I just have an idea in mind. And then just work in all of the ideas for that specific section. So that's how I start my productions. That's how I get off to a flying start when I'm working. The whole idea behind it is spend as little time as possible on the non-creative parts and spend as much time as possible on actually implementing ideas into the track. You can see that for now, I'm just setting up the kick and the bass very, very quickly. It took me like a minute, not even, to actually make the kick and bass. And then I made the drums really quickly, and now I can just start copying over these different sections. The 3 different sections corresponding to the 3 different energy levels basically. I can just copy them over and place them whenever I need them. Which means that it's really just copy a block, paste a block, and work on the ideas in the block again whenever I want to add a new block or new section to the track. Now I'm not saying that you have to write exactly like me or that this is the best way to do it. I just want you to know that when it comes to getting creative and being creative and staying creative in a production, this is, in my opinion, the best way to do it because it minimizes the amount of time that you're working on that tedious task, which is making sure that the kick and bass works and all of that kind of stuff. There is a prerequisite in that you need to have the resources to be able to do this. For example, you need kicks that work well, a few kick samples that work well. You need a bassline preset that works well. You need some drums that you know and that work well. And you need to have a system in place, at least for your basic volumes, so that you have at least a template that you can work with. Again, we're still not mixing. You cannot really mix at this stage. You just need to wait when you have all of the elements, then you can actually mix. But when you're producing, it is nice for everything to have at least a little bit of a sensible level so that you can actually work with it. So that's it. That's everything that I do when I'm starting a track. I hope that you found it useful and that you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.